Step 39. This is Galatians 5, and we're starting in verse 16, and we're going to go down to 23. The gist of this passage is basically that we're supposed to be operating in the Spirit rather than in the flesh. And that is the gist of Galatians. Okay? And where this comes to a head is the Gospel of Romans versus the Gospel of Rabbinical Judaism. Because they are trying to do the Torah by the flesh. Now we, on the Christian side, we have similar problems to this. There's applications of this, even though we're not trying to do the law. A lot of Christians say you don't have to do the law at all. Some Christians say you don't have to do parts of the law, and other Christians are saying that you're supposed to do the law, but it has nothing to do with salvation. You know, all these different things that people teach. And so that side of the equation is not trying to do the law by the flesh, obviously, because they're not really trying to do the law. Their idea of the law is pretty fuzzy. Okay. The problem where the flesh comes in on the Christian side is more subtle things like I'm guilty. I feel guilty about sin. And why? Because I'm trying to make up for it in order to get forgiveness. I'm trying to do something. Okay? I've got a problem that God is not fixing fast enough, and so I'm anxious about, trying to get a solution to it. I'm operating in the flesh when I'm doing those things, and I'm not operating in the Spirit. The Spirit would look at those things and say, I'm going to go to God about it, and I'm going to relax in the meantime, because I know that He's got me covered. He's going to take care of me. Even if I get killed, He's still taking care of me one way or the other. Okay? So that is relaxing in the Spirit. But when you start thinking in terms of the Christian application only, this is a real problem, because you're not thinking about other people. You're thinking about yourself. So if you come up out of the Christian side of the thing and you have an application for a way of thinking that you used to have, that is applying it to yourself. And that's a very selfish thing to do, okay? We have to understand that the people that we run into, they don't have the same background that we have. They have different backgrounds, okay? We may run into someone who has a rabbinical Jewish background, okay? We are a Messianic group. We run into Jews periodically. So it's something that, and as we study Galatians, that needs to be our first consideration in the interpretation of the passage. We have to think about this other person who is got this rabbinical Jewish do the law in the flesh for forgiveness type of attitude. That enables us to understand Galatians in the way that it was written by Paul. That was what Paul was thinking when he was writing it. Okay? If we're immediately going to some other application, Christian application, whatever, we're missing his intended thought, and we're going to be fuzzy in our application as a result. Applications have to be dependent on the interpretation. And there's only one interpretation of each passage. Each passage is written to say some particular thing. In this case, in Galatians, it's written to the rabbinical Jewish idea of doing the law in the flesh in order to get forgiveness. If we're not clear on that interpretation, and we go immediately into an application of some other situation, we're going to be fuzzy about it. We're going to possibly be wrong about it. Okay, and this is where you see a lot of wacky sermons out there on various scriptures. They'll pull out a scripture out of the Bible that seems to support whatever that is that they want to say, and they're not considering the gist of the passage. They're not considering what the Bible has to say. They're just using the Bible to support whatever they want to say. They have an idea of something that is a problem or that needs to get fixed. They have an idea of something they want to push. They have an idea. They start with their idea. And so it is reading into the scripture their idea. And this is what we want to get away from as we interpret the scripture. We want to find out, what is it trying to tell us, okay? And if it's talking about rabbinical Judaism, we need to go to rabbinical Judaism. We need to think about rabbinical Judaism. When we look at Galatians, we need to think about rabbinical Judaism. We cannot just dismiss that part of the interpretation. We have to go to that. Otherwise, whatever application we come up with is just going to be our idea. And it could be right, could be wrong, who knows, right? But if it fits the interpretation, then we know it's right, okay? So anyway, this passage is the crux of Galatians, okay? Let me just read it real quickly. I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things you wish. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. That is, you're not under the curse of the law because you're doing the law. If you're doing the flesh, you're going to be under the curse of the law because you're going to be violating it periodically. Why? Because the lust is seated in the flesh. Okay? And then he goes into the works of the flesh are evident, which are, and he gives a big long list of sins. Now, this big long list of sins is very important to us. We need to go through them, and I'm going to do that on a later video. We're going to go through each one of these, and we're going to find out which ones are being added to our list of sins that we need to get rid of, okay? Because there's a few things that we're going to be able to get rid of as a result of this level, this Galatians level, okay? And so we're going to zero in on those ones that are new. Then, verse 22 says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, etc. Here he's getting into the fruit of the Spirit. This is very important because this is the test of Galatians. So if you're operating in some of these fruits, if you're seeing a difference in your life from the way you used to react, that's telling you that you're growing. You are developing some of the fruits of the Spirit. When the Spirit is inside you, He is changing you, and you're seeing that change by seeing changes in your life in terms of your gut reaction to circumstances. Okay, so, and again, I'm going to do a separate video on the fruit of the Spirit and the Galatians test. Okay, and then there's one other thing that comes up, and this is from Psalm 39. Psalm 39 talks about being quiet in order to not violate the Scripture. And what this is basically saying is that when we're in our meetings, we should not be speaking stuff from the flesh. We should be speaking stuff from the Spirit. The Spirit should lead everything that we say. Even if we're reading Scripture, the Spirit should lead us to read that particular Scripture. Okay? So all of the things that we say should be led by the Spirit, and it should, of course, line up with the Scripture. And so this is what I see as a vow of silence. Now, vow, you've heard of the vow of silence from the Catholic tradition. This is going to be a little bit different kind of vow of silence. And we are not supposed to be doing vows, but this particular vow is one that is necessary at this level that we need to think about doing, because we need to advance in the way that we do our meetings. It needs to become more spirit-led. Okay, so, and I'm going to do a separate video on that. Okay, so so there's a number of things that are in here. I just wanted to give you the kind of the gist of the passage in this particular video. So rabbinical Judaism, doing things by the flesh. This is what we need to get away from. We need to get away from this. And even if you're not in rabbinical Judaism, you need to be able to understand their viewpoint. Understanding someone's viewpoint that is different from you is a very important aspect of love. A lot of people, including myself, very disconnected to other people, especially other people that are different than us. And understanding a viewpoint that is different than us is something that we really need to work on in order to have a connection to those people who are different than us, and in order to love them. And if you can't love people that are different than you, then you can't love anybody, because everybody's really different than you. Okay? There's nobody that's exactly the same as you. God has no reason to create somebody else that is exactly the same as you. Okay? Everybody is a little bit different, and understanding those differences means understanding that person. And we need to understand people in order to love them. That is how we connect to them. So there's a lot of great things in this particular passage. This is a really big topic. We might have to go a second week on it, because there's a lot of stuff in here. All right, step 39.